Hello, space friends. Captain Snuggles here, back in X4 Foundations to wrap up my series of 8.0 AI combat testing with the Station Demolition test. I'm going to evaluate the performance of different ship classes against different types of stations in both low and high attention, focusing mainly on low. Station demolition has been a touchy subject in the X4 community for over 7 years. It's had its ups and downs, so as we enter a new year and a new set of updates, let's take a look at where things stand now. First, let's cover some background and context. Destroyers have always been the standard ships for station demolition because they have the most options for outranging station guns. However, they've always had issues in high attention, the usual issue being flying too close and getting blasted by the station's turrets. The paradigm shifted around version 6.2 when destroyers started repositioning much less frequently, leading to way fewer kamikaze runs. As it turns out, that was due to a pathfinding bug. It slowed down station demolition if you were using one of the standard fleet attack orders, but it also had an easy workaround, which was just to attack the station from multiple angles. Using that method, we were able to consistently destroy stations quickly and safely from versions 6.2 to 7.1. Then, in 7.5, the bug was fixed, causing destroyers and battleships to once again start making frequent flybys of the target station. Simultaneously, ship pathfinding was reworked in a way that made those flybys much more suicidal than they were previously. Here's what that looks like. Prior to 7.5, pathfinding was mostly linear. A ship trying to reach the opposite side of a large obstruction would fly away from it at an angle, stop, turn, and then fly to its destination. In 7.5, NPC pilots finally learned how to fly in a curve, which is really nice for avoiding non-hostile obstructions, but against obstructions that will shoot you if you get too close, the new pathfinding is pretty much hard-coded to maximize the time spent getting shot. As a result, from 7.1 to 7.5, the time required for destroyers to take down stations improved slightly, but the number of casualties skyrocketed. At the same time, version 7.5 changed high-attention subcapital behavior in a way that dramatically reduces their sustained DPS against large targets by greatly extending the intervals between their attack runs. Some ships are better than others. I've measured anywhere from 50% to 90% reductions in sustained DPS. Against capital ships, you can work around that by just focusing on burst damage instead. However, that doesn't work against stations. They have so much HP that you're always working with sustained DPS, so post 7.5 subcapitals struggle even more against stations than they did in previous patches. All that is to say, all methods of high-attention station demolition received a massive nerf in version 7.5, and neither 7.6 nor 8.0 has offered any improvement. That's well documented over on Ragnos28's channel, so in the interest of contributing something new to the discussion, I'm going to focus mainly on low attention. I did do some high attention testing, and we'll talk about that, but I treated it as supplemental material rather than a primary focus. So, with that context out of the way, let's talk about my methods. I wanted to look at how different ship classes performed against stations, with performance measured by loss rates and completion time. I chose ships and loadouts that were fairly optimized for low attention, although with the capital ships there's not much difference between the low and high attention variations. I did not use any missile loadouts because stations can absorb a lot of missiles, and you usually have to take down a lot of stations to clear a sector, so the logistics there get very cumbersome very fast. I'm looking for fleets with endurance, ones that can go out and have a meaningful impact on the state of the galaxy with minimal support. I'm also looking for fleets that can do all that on a tight budget, because the smaller the budget, the earlier you can deploy it, and the earlier you can deploy it, the bigger its long-term effects on the galaxy will be. So, with all that in mind, I deployed single loadout fleets worth a total of 75 million credits each, using Blast Mortar Shees, Plasma Nemesis Vanguards, Mass Driver Dragon Raiders, Plasma Flak Odysseus E's, and Plasma Beam Flak Asgards. As always, I make no claim that these specific ships or loadouts are the 100% optimal choice for your personal gameplay. I selected them purely for my testing purposes. I sent each of those fleets up against 3 stations. First up was this scale plate packed factory, which was well armed with 26 large plasma turrets, 34 medium flak turrets, and 56 defense drones. I chose that factory to represent the standard stations used by meatbags throughout the galaxy. Then, because I felt like watching my subcapitals die horribly, I included this Ka'ak installation, which is the strongest version of the Ka'ak station. Fleets had to take down all its little defense platforms and the station itself while dealing with the endless waves of Ka'ak ships that it spawns. And lastly, of course, we have the Xenon. The station I chose is intermediate difficulty, a solar power plant with a lot of guns but a reasonably simple layout, tougher than a defense station but not as terrifying as a shipyard. In low attention, I made each fleet fight each station twice, unless it just horribly underperformed in the first run. Then I supplemented that dataset with high attention runs whenever I thought there was something to be gained from it. All in all, there were 38 runs in this test, 26 low attention, 12 high attention. Now, let's talk results. First off, the Mass Driver Dragon Raider strategy no longer works correctly. It used to be extremely strong. You could just park the corvettes somewhere in low attention, and they would vaporize anything in front of them way before it could shoot back. Absolutely phenomenal for holding gates and demolishing stations. However, somewhere along the way, low attention target acquisition has become unreliable for ships that don't have an active attack order, so this fleet's damage output has become very inconsistent to the point where it's basically non-functional at this price point. So we won't talk any more about that fleet, and we'll move on to going through each other fleet's performance against each station. Against the Scale Plate Factory, in low attention, the Nemesis Vanguard performed best, with an insanely fast completion speed of about 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and only 1 ship lost in 2 runs. The Asgard came in a close second, with 0 losses and a completion time slightly under 6 minutes. Then came the Destroyers in third, with a completion time of about 12 minutes and no losses except a few defense drones. And in last place, the Shees, which finished in 6 minutes in their first run, but took 28% attrition to do it, which I think is too high to be considered successful. In high attention, the Shees were redeemed with 0 losses, almost 0 hull damage, and completion times around 4.5 minutes. The Destroyers made some close flybys as usual, but none of them exploded, and they finished in 11 minutes. The Nemesis bafflingly struggled to hit the station with its plasma cannons, but it still finished in 13 minutes with no losses. And the Asgard took 41 minutes to finish, thanks to some extreme pathfinding issues. Moving on to the Ka'ak installation. In low attention, Destroyers performed best with an average completion time of exactly 1 hour and no losses except a whole lot of defense drones. The Asgard came in second with a completion time of 1 hour and 45 minutes and only the loss of all its defense drones. Unsurprisingly, the subcapitals got slaughtered, although the Nemesis fleet at least managed to take down a couple of defense platforms with it, placing it in third and the Shees in fourth. High attention was pretty much a foregone conclusion, so I only tested the Destroyers, which finished in 50 minutes and only lost their drones and a handful of surface elements. Ka'ak weapons aren't capable of damaging capital ships, so if you really want to watch destroyers blowing up stations in high attention, this is the place to do it. Now, the big ticket item, the Xenon Solar Power Plant. In low attention, the top performing fleet was the Shi, with 0 losses, 0 hull damage, and a completion time of 25 minutes. Second place went to the Asgard, with no major damage taken and an average completion time of 46 minutes. Destroyers came in third, with no losses and an average time of 59 minutes. And Corvettes placed fourth, with a very fast completion time of 16.5 minutes, but too many losses at about 18% attrition. Then, in high attention, this is where the 7.5 changes really had a strong impact. Destroyers lost 8 ships in 3 runs, all of them during unprovoked close-range flybys, putting them at an average of 38% attrition. I tried several different attack methods, but the behavior didn't change at all. There doesn't seem to be any way to have your destroyers actively attack the station without making kamikaze runs. The destroyers did, at least, destroy the target, with an average time of 37 minutes, which is more than I can say for the other ships. The Asgard was crippled by pathfinding. It would destroy a few modules, then spend 10 minutes trying to line up a shot on the next target, by which point the destroyed modules were already being rebuilt, so it was just stuck in an endless loop and never managed to fully destroy the station. The Nemesis put up a decent fight, but eventually got picked apart by graviton turrets and failed both its attempts. And I know from experience that the Shi loadout I was using can't fight defense drones and turrets at the same time, so I didn't even try with it. I'm really tempted to try to craft a fighter loadout that can win here, but that's way beyond the scope of this test. So, those are all the results. Let's talk about them, starting with the elephant in the room. You all are probably surprised by the Shi placing first against the Xenon station. I certainly was. I assume the AoE from the blast mortars just stripped away all the turrets before they could land any solid hits, which just left the defense drone DPS, which wasn't much when distributed across all the fighters. Basically, I think the way damage is distributed in low attention was very favorable for the Shis, both on offense and defense. I don't know if you'd get the same results with weapons other than blast mortars, but I'm using the best available weapons and turrets on all my ships, so apples to apples, best weapon to best weapon, the blast mortar Shi did win that portion of the test very decisively. I thought it was pretty interesting that the Shi placed first and the Nemesis placed fourth against the Xenon station, but then the Nemesis placed first and the Shi placed fourth against the Scale Plate station. I assume it all comes down to the damage and accuracy profiles of flak turrets versus graviton turrets versus defense drones, but that all or nothing dynamic of subcapital station demolition was just really striking. The capital ships also had a sort of flip-flopping dynamic, where the Asgard did better than the destroyers against the Xenon, and then vice versa against the Ka'ak. What I noticed against the Ka'ak was that the Asgard wandered around a lot. Stations do actually have individual modules that get destroyed one by one in low attention, and then the attacker has to move to get in range of the next one, etc., etc., but the Asgard moved way too much for that. I saw something similar in high attention, where the Asgard stuttered and stalled and wiggled and wandered and generally had an extremely hard time putting consistent damage into the target. In fairness to the Asgard, it was at a disadvantage because you can only afford a single one at the 75 million credit price point, so it's possible that only having one ship to work with makes the AI handle station assaults differently than if it has a whole fleet. Not sure, but that's my only coherent theory aside from the Asgard's just janky. I don't think there was anything else really surprising in the results. That said, I was hoping the destroyers would do better. They only placed first against the Ka'ak station, which is by far the most niche out of the 3 targets. They were way outclassed by other ships against the other 2 targets. At least they're reliable. They could take down all 3 stations without losses, even if they were slow. The Asgard can do the same thing with generally better results, and specialized fleets of subcapitals will get you way better results against individual station types, but at least this is a thing that destroyers can do reliably. And when I say destroyers, I really mean the long-range destroyers. I wouldn't expect the same performance from Terran or Split ships, but again, this test focused on comparing the best against the best in low attention. As for high attention, if you really want to attack stations with destroyers, I'd recommend trying the Phoenix E with split engines. That's going to be the ship with the best chance of surviving these kamikaze runs. It won't survive the worst ones, nothing will, but I think it's likely to survive the average one. That's just my best guess, so take it with a grain of salt. Before we wrap up, let's talk about hybrid fleets, since someone always asks. Low attention station assaults work best if all your ships have similar speeds and similar engagement ranges, because you want them all hitting the station in one big clump. If they're fighting within station gun range, or if they happen to wander into range, that's going to give them the best chance of survival because it distributes the station DPS over the maximum number of targets. In general, I don't think there are many situations where bringing a hybrid fleet in low attention will really be helpful, but you might be able to come up with something clever. Obviously, carriers and auxiliaries are exceptions. They'll always be useful. That's it for this test. There's always plenty more to talk about, so if you have thoughts or questions, feel free to share them down in the comments section. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you'll tune in next time, and until then, this is Captain Snuggles, signing off.